So we're approaching the 2-month mark since mum and dad passed away now. And I think there's, again, this is still very, very early days, of course, but there's definitely been, I think, a lot of surprises, I think, about this process in terms of just how it feels currently. Um, and again, I need to caveat all of this for anybody watching to say, as people always say, grief is so individual, right? We have so many different types of relationships, and you know, they mean different things to different people. So it's such an individual process. But I think the thing that I'm noticing is there's almost like, and this just comes down to definitions and the problem with language and words in general. I think there is a kind of idea or a perception that I had of grief. When you hear the word grief, you think about this, you know, inconsolable. The image I always had of grief was just this state of being inconsolable, just crying hysterically and not being able to get out of bed, and being miserable and depressed. And it hasn't been that. I mean, there have been, don't get me wrong, like especially when it first happened, the first 2 weeks, there were days like that. There were days where, just random moments. I would be driving, or I would just be at home and I would just burst out crying in tears. A thought would come up and it would just set me off. A song would come on. I would see a picture. I would remember something and it would just come like in floods. Um, and there were these real moments of, I said this in some of my previous videos, just moments of, um, stagnation slash a feeling of lethargy, I think was the biggest thing. And things are starting to, I feel like the energy is starting to transmute a little bit, if that's the right word. It's starting to shift and change, and I feel it's starting to create a lot of positive changes in me. Um, but still, what I'm starting to realize now about grief and the word grief is what it's kind of started to become now is this residual residual sadness, I guess. Um, you know, it's like it's really difficult to describe. It's kind of like, let me show you something actually. So this picture I have on my wall here, I don't know if you can see, I really like this about Japanese art. This is actually quite common in Japanese art, but you see there's like this kind of red staining at the top of the image. It's kind of almost like a watermark that a lot of Japanese artists use at the top of the pictures. But in my mind, that's kind of how grief feels, is it's like this kind of, I guess, blue. Blue feels like an appropriate color for grief for some reason, but it's like or the picture of my life has been kind of not stained. I feel like stained is the wrong word, but just painted with this like undercurrent at the bottom of the picture. Like it's this residual sadness that has bled into the picture, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. It is now part of the picture, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I feel like, it has given a lot more color, literally a lot more color and depth to everything, to all of my experiences. And it really does. That sadness is, and that grief, again, it's not what I thought it was. It's not this inconsolability or this major depression that I thought it was. It is much more of a just a this tinged feeling of, there being a sadness, there a sadness and a feeling of loss, and it's the kind of thing where it's not, I'm not consciously aware of it all the time. It's there all the time, and I'm not consciously aware of it all the time. It will very often come up, like I've got a digital photo frame that I bought, and I have like slideshows. It's got pictures of like mum and me and mum and Ben, and like just the family together, like us three. So it kind of goes through these pictures, and when I catch a glance at it, again, there is that feeling of sadness, and even just, like looking at it now, I can feel that sadness there. But it's also that sadness is also, there's a lot of joy in that as well, and even though it's making me emotional, there is, it isn't just a sadness, it's a joy for, having had such, an amazing person in my life. It's the same when I look at, pictures of like dad as well, and like the messages, and these little things, like pictures is an example, right? The other thing I was looking at on the YouTube channel where I've been posting these videos to. It's funny, I was looking at it earlier, and mum is literally the only person that I think I have had other comments, but like mum was by far my biggest fan. She would comment on all of the videos, and just some of the comments, they're just like, I did this video about body dysmorphia a little while ago, and I don't know if you'll be able to see if it focuses or not, but it says, "You are beautiful, Tom. Simple as that." And I saw that, and I just, it's such a weird thing. It's a really, really strange thing seeing comments and messages from somebody who is no longer there. I have had this experience before with friends who have passed away as well, and even we've got like a group chat with one of our friends, and where we've like been arranging like curry nights and stuff in the past, and it's kind of like he's still in the group. you know um it's just weird. It's such a weird feeling. And it's even more, of course, with like, mum, and because there was such a strong connection there. So it's yeah, it's those moments, I think, where that kind of sadness comes to the surface. It's always, and this is what I mean, like it can be triggered, you can spot something out the corner of your eye, and it sets it off. Um and that's what I mean by, like, I feel like it's always there. I'm not necessarily always consciously aware of it, but it just takes a word, a sound, a song, an image to be that reminder that sets that sadness off. But again, that sadness, it's not just sadness in isolation. There is such a rich tapestry of emotions included in that. It's just this deep emotional well, so many different feelings together, and it's kind of beautiful in a way. um and there's a lot of things as well which I think I'm yet to feel or experience, and I think I might have touched on this in one of the last videos, but one of the things that does make me like really sad to think about is, for both mum and dad really, is just the thought that, I think mum especially, actually, just because she was so good with kids, but if I ever have kids of my own one day, it's so sad to think that she's not going to be able to meet them. that is a really sad feeling, and I think it will be even more sad when/if it actually happens. So there's a lot of things I think that, um, you know, and again, even I mentioned in the original video I did, I think of like Christmas time. We're so used to spending Christmases with mum. It's always been the way, and I think it's gonna be strange. It's gonna be strange to see. I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing for Christmas. Maybe, who knows? I might not even be in the country. Um, but if I am, I'm sure me and Ben and Sky will probably do something together, and it'll be weird. It'll be weird not having mum there. Over that period. I think one of the things, I need to try and get a recording of this actually. One of the things Ben said at mum's funeral, which was, really beautiful, was, that we don't know, nobody really knows how energy is dispersed or dissipated into the world when somebody passes away, but it is, it's a transformation of energy. It's like a kind of metamorphosis almost, right? Where that energy leaves the body and it goes somewhere where we don't know. Um, but it goes somewhere. And, I think it does inevitably, part of that energy, I think, goes into the people that that person loved and the people who loved them. That's one of the places it goes amongst many others. And I think we all become richer for having known that person, and that's the thing. So I think all of this, it's a very kind of mixed feeling, but and I think there's different ways of looking at these things. I think you probably can get caught up in, and actually, I want to caveat all of this. Something that I do think is important to note here, because I was talking with a good friend of mine who I met up with last weekend, I think, on Saturday. And I was saying about how with my dad's wife, my stepmom Lisa, you know, it's so the whole grief process for her, like I can't even imagine the proximity. I think is the biggest difference. When there's someone that you spend every day with and you literally share a bed with them, when you go to sleep, like they're there, like they're always there. Like my nan and granddad, like when my can't even remember which one of them passed away first, but where I think when you lose a spouse, someone you're literally sharing a bed with, that must just be such a profound sense of loss, because you cannot escape the reminders. And I think this is where obviously it's heartbreaking to lose a parent, but I suppose this depends on the age as well. And actually, my friend I met up with, she lost her dad when she was very young. um so even that is a huge thing, because especially at that age, where they are such a more they're in so much closer proximity, and as you get older, you obviously move out and then you don't see your parents as much. So I think the proximity helps with that to an extent, because you don't necessarily have the daily reminders. And I talked about this in the last video, you know, like mum, I maybe saw her once or twice a month. Dad was even less frequent, maybe once every couple of months. So it's kind of, and I think I acknowledged this in my last video as well. It's like, there have been times where it's like, oh, this is weird. I normally see mum by now. And then you kind of realize, you know, it's kind of like that realization. Because it's almost like your nervous system is, you know, tuned and adjusted to seeing this person at a certain time or frequency. But again, if you see someone every day and then all of a sudden they're not there, it's crazy, crazy, crazy to think about. So I think everything I'm saying, you know, I think it is worth bearing that in mind. You know, like it is very, very different. And I think obviously you know, there's lots of you know, mum especially, and dad as well, they've, you know, been there through very pivotal moments in our life. And if I think back on those again, the sadness can surface. But again, in a situation where you're with someone every day, you cannot escape that. And you know, there's even things like, actually, this is really interesting. So um when mum got ill, I moved her in with me the beginning of this year. Well, no, I mean, she got diagnosed with the metastasis June of last year. And then, you know, she had the surgery and stuff. And it was this beginning of this year, I moved her in with me when she, you know, they said it had come back and she was getting really ill again. And then, you know, we eventually moved her into the care home, but she was staying with me for, you know, for months. And that was her room, like right over there. And going into that room, there is a sense of a feeling of sadness, you know? And it's funny, it kind of is isolated to that room, because even though there were times where, you know, we would sit on the sofa together and we would like play a game or, you know, watch something, it wasn't that frequent. And actually, she deteriorated so fast that she did spend most of her time here in that room. So this space, it doesn't like it's not like the constant reminders of her. But in there, it definitely, you know, it feels, there is this feeling of sadness. So again, I guess where I'm trying to go with that is like, I think even, you know, for people, if if you're living in your like a childhood home, for example, right, and then you lose your parents, like you can't escape that. It is everywhere. It is all surrounding, and then naturally that sense of grief is, it's always surface level because it's there in your face. You can't escape it. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that, you know, for everything I'm talking about here, I think, of course, I have to bear that in mind, and anyone watching, you know, to bear that in mind as well. Like, it is going to be very different, I think, depending on the circumstances and your proximity to the person and the relationship with the person and all that kind of thing as well. And even now, you know, like, I think there's definitely, there's like, and you can probably tell from, you know, these videos, there is less of a deep, deep sadness when I think of dad. But I think it's because there just wasn't the same proximity. There wasn't the same time we spent together. You know, he wasn't the person that raised me. He was there through my very younger years, maybe till I was about 4 or 5 from what I've pieced together. And then, you know, we would see him very often after that, you know, like every weekend, every other weekend, and it got kind of less and less as teenagers, young adult, etc. But he was still a very pivotal and increasingly so as I've been speaking to my counselor, like a very important part of my life, maybe more so than I had actually realized. And, you know, I think some of that stuff maybe just hasn't even surfaced yet. You know, maybe the reason I don't feel sadness is because actually there's other emotions there, like anger and that is still tied up in these, deep, complex emotions that were suppressed as a child, that will probably, as I, dive more into this, begin to surface. So, there's so many different layers of all of this. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where things are at the moment. So I just wanted to check in with that. I suppose next week, well, probably the next time I do a video will be the 2-month mark, the 2-month anniversary. We're actually this weekend, me, Ben, Sky, a couple friends, we're we're do- we're doing a kind of tribute to Mum. Mum used to make, when we lived at our old home, um, these legendary tuna pasta bakes. So we're having a tuna pasta bake day in tribute to Mum. Mum sent her recipe to Crystal, one of my brother's friends. So we're gonna make the tuna pasta bake from back in the day, which will be fun. So we'll see how that goes as well. I'm sure that'll be, again, it's just these things, these little, even the taste of it, maybe, who knows, maybe that'll bring something up as well. But that's where things are at the moment. And I think, again, so far, I definitely feel it's interesting. Like I say, it's kind of like there is a richness, there is also a hollowness as well. It's this weird, almost like contradiction, There's like a hole that will never be filled, but there is also more color, I feel, to the picture. So it's a strange kind of paradigm almost. It's a kind of bizarre thing. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like this beautiful. I've just realized that picture kind of looks like a harp, but this beautiful sadness is all I can frame it as. But yeah, anyway, I'm just rambling now. So just wanted to check in with that update, how things are going, and I'll see you guys in the next video.